The bell had just rung, but the real game was about to begin. In a courtyard paved with marble and lined with perfect smiles, Luca Martinez stood out like a crack in glass. Too quiet, too poor, too different. His shoes squeaked on the polished floors, his voice trembled when he spoke, and his lunchbox, dented and covered in fading stickers, became the latest target. The golden boys of Westridge Academy circled, laughing, mocking, daring him to fight back. But Luca didn't flinch. He just breathed slow and steady, because they didn't know who trained him, and they had no idea what was coming. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Your city, your couch, maybe your commute? I'd love to know, so leave a comment. This story's a quiet storm, one you'll be thinking about later. And hey, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of these. The bell rang across Westridge Academy's marble courtyard. Students in crisp uniforms rushed past a boy who stood frozen at the gate. This was Luca, clutching a worn backpack and a mismatched lunchbox that had seen better days. His new uniform hung slightly too big on his slim frame, a reminder that he didn't quite belong in this world of wealth and privilege. Just breathe, Luca whispered to himself, repeating the mantra his father had taught him. For counts in, hold for 7, out for 8, his shoulders relaxed slightly as the familiar rhythm calmed his racing heart. Inside the grand entrance hall, students parted like water around a stone as Ryder Chambers descended the main staircase. His uniform looked custom-tailored, his smile practiced and perfect. 3 boys flanked him, laughing at something on his phone. They moved with the easy confidence of those who had never questioned their place in the world. Luca watched from the doorway, trying to make himself invisible. His schedule trembled in his hands. Room 214. History. He needed to find the stairs. Are you lost? A voice cut through his thoughts. It was a girl with paint-stained fingers and kind eyes. I am looking for our room 214, Luca stammered, the words catching in his throat as they always did when he was nervous. Maya, I'm headed there too. She smiled, but her eyes darted nervously toward Ryder's group. Come on before the bell. In history class, Lucas sat quietly at the back, his eyes downcast. When the teacher called attendance, his voice betrayed him again. Luca Martinez, he managed, his face burning as snickers rippled through the room. Luca, Ryder mimicked under his breath, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Laughter followed, quick and cruel. During lunch, Luca found a quiet corner in the courtyard. He opened his father's old metal lunchbox, dented and covered with fading stickers from fighting competitions around the world. Inside was a carefully packed meal, rice, vegetables, and protein, just as his father had always prepared. Balance in all things. What's with the toy lunchbox? Ryder's voice cut through Luca's moment of peace. My little brother had one like that. When he was 5, Luca looked up into Ryder's smirking face, flanked by his friends. His chest tightened, but he remembered his father's words. Your response in the first 3 seconds determines everything that follows. It was my dad's, Luca said simply, the words coming out clear and steady. Something in his tone made Ryder pause, but only for a moment. Well, your dad has kindergarten taste. What's next? A Spider-Man backpack. Laughter erupted around them. Luca closed the lunchbox gently. That night, Luca stood in front of the memory wall in their small apartment. His mother had hung his father's photos, medals, and news clippings. Marco Martinez, mindfulness coach and MMA fighter, smiling from a dozen frames. How was your first day? His mother asked, her eyes tired from her nursing shift. Fine, Luca said, tracing the edge of a photo where his father stood in a fighting stance, focused and calm. Dad would say it's just a new dojo to master. His mother smiled sadly. He'd be proud of you for trying. She touched the medal hanging in the center of the wall. Remember what he always said? Luca nodded. The strongest fighter isn't the one who hits hardest. It's the one who remains standing when the fight is over. As he prepared for bed, Luca moved through the familiar sequence of stretches and breathing his father had taught him since he was 5. Center, ground, prepare. Tomorrow would be another day at Westridge Academy, another test of the strength his father had built in him, not in his fists, but in his spirit. The second day at Westridge began with whispers that followed Luca through the halls. "That stutter boy," someone muttered as he passed. His worn shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floors, drawing more unwanted attention. In chemistry lab, the teacher assigned partners for the semester. "Ryder Chambers and Luca Martinez," she announced, seemingly oblivious to Ryder's groan of disgust. "Great, I'm stuck with a charity case," Ryder mumbled as Luca took the seat beside him. "Try not to blow us up with those shaky hands, stutter boy." Luca focused on his breathing. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. The trembling in his hands stilled as he carefully measured the chemicals. His movements were precise, methodical, the same careful control his father had taught him when wrapping his hands before training. "Whoa, how'd you do that so fast?" Ryder asked, genuinely surprised as Luca completed the first step perfectly. "And my dad taught me to focus," Luca said. "It's all about patience and attention." Ryder rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Just don't mess this up for me. I need an A." At lunch, Ryder and his friends had found a new game. They surrounded Luca's table, grabbing his father's lunchbox and tossing it between them. "Come on, stutter boy. Speak up if you want it back," taunted one of Ryder's friends as Luca stood quietly. Inside, Luca's heart pounded. His father would have told him to pick his battles, to respond rather than react. But his father's lunchbox, the one he'd carried to every fight, was the last thing Luca had of him. Maya appeared suddenly, snatching the lunchbox mid-toss. "Real original, guys. Stealing lunch? What's next? Taking candy from babies?" Ryder's smile hardened. "Stay out of this, art freak. Nobody asked you. I don't need an invitation to call out jerks." Maya shot back, handing the lunchbox to Luca. As Ryder and his friends stalked away, Maya sat beside Luca. "Those guys are the worst. Been like that since elementary school." "Thanks," Luca said, running his fingers over a dent in the metal box. "This was my dad's." "Was? He died last year. Brain aneurysm after a fight." Maya's eyes widened. "Your dad was a fighter." Luca nodded, opening the lunchbox to reveal the perfectly portioned meal inside. "MMA. But he always said the fighting was just a way to test what he really taught: control, balance, mindfulness." During PE class, Coach Daniels had them running obstacle courses. When it was Luca's turn, he moved with unexpected grace. His body seemed to flow over and under barriers, his balance perfect, his movements efficient. "Where'd you learn to move like that, Martinez?" Coach asked, impressed. Before Luca could answer, Ryder cut in. "Probably running from bullies at his old school." The coach frowned. "That's enough, Chambers." After school, Luca found his locker defaced with a crude drawing and the words "Stutter Boy" scrawled across it. He stared at it calmly, then began methodically cleaning it with tissues and hand sanitizer from his bag. Miss Chin, his literature teacher, stopped beside him. "Need help with that?" "And no thank you, Miss Chin. I can handle it." She watched him work with steady, careful movements. "You know, Luca, I notice you have unusual composure for someone your age. Especially someone in a new school." Luca shrugged. "My dad said that how we respond to disrespect shows more about us than about the person disrespecting us." "Your father sounds wise." He was. Luca finished cleaning and stepped back to examine his work. He taught fighters, but not just how to hit. How to be still inside, even when everything outside is chaos. Miss Chen nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to hear more about that sometime." As Luca walked home, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw Ryder and 2 friends following at a distance, their intentions clear in their smirks. Something was building. He could feel it. His father had always told him to sense the energy before a storm breaks. The real fight, his father's voice echoed in his memory, always begins before the first punch is thrown. 2 weeks into the semester, Luca had established a routine. Every morning before school, he found a quiet corner of the courtyard to practice his breathing and center himself. His father had called it preparing the mind for battle, though his battles were now with calculus and chemistry rather than opponents in a ring. One morning, as Luca moved through a series of subtle Tai Chi movements, he noticed Miss Chen watching from her classroom window. When their eyes met, she nodded with something like recognition in her gaze. In class that day, she assigned a personal essay. Write about something that has shaped you, she instructed. Something that has built the person you are becoming. Luca stared at the blank page, his father's teachings flooding his mind. The pencil moved almost without his conscious direction. For once, the words flowed without a stutter. After class, Miss Chen asked him to stay behind. Your writing about your father's philosophy was beautiful, Luca. Would you consider sharing parts of it for our class discussion tomorrow? Panic flashed through him. I don't think I can read it out loud. Your stammer seems to disappear when you talk about your father's teachings, she observed gently. Luca hadn't noticed. Maybe because those words are his, not mine. They're already perfect in my head. Consider it, she said. Sometimes our greatest strength grows from what others see as weakness. At lunch, Maya invited Luca to sit with her and two other students who existed on the social margins of Westridge Academy. For the first time, Luca found himself laughing, relaxing into conversation without fear of judgment. Across the cafeteria, Ryder watched, his eyes narrowing. Looks like Stutter Boy found his little freak family, he commented to his friends. But something had shifted in the school's atmosphere. Several students who normally laughed at Ryder's jokes remained silent, uncomfortable. A few glanced toward Luca with curiosity rather than contempt. In PE class that afternoon, Coach Daniels announced they would be studying basic self-defense techniques. Partner up, he instructed. We'll practice simple holds and escapes. No one moved to partner with Luca until Coach deliberately paired him with Ryder. Chambers, you work with Martinez. Ryder smirked. Try not to cry when I take you down, Stutter Boy. The coach demonstrated a basic wrist grab and how to break free. When it was their turn to practice, Ryder grabbed Luca's wrist with unnecessary force. Let's see you get out of this, he challenged. To everyone's surprise, Luca executed the escape flawlessly, his movements so smooth that Ryder stumbled forward, off balance. Good technique, Martinez, Coach noted with surprise. Where'd you learn that? Luca shrugged. My dad taught me. Was he in the military or something? He was an MMA fighter and coach. He believed in teaching defense before offense. A ripple of whispers spread through the class. Ryder's face flushed with embarrassment. Lucky move, he muttered. That afternoon, Ryder and his friends cornered Luca by his locker. So you think you're tough now? Showing off in PE, Luca remained still, his breathing steady. I wasn't showing off. I heard you talking to Maya about your dad, Ryder pressed. Some washed-up cage fighter. Is that supposed to impress us? Something flickered in Luca's eyes, not anger, but a brief flash of protective love. My father was Luca Martinez, 3-time regional champion. But more importantly, he trained champions to control their minds, not just their bodies. For a moment, recognition dawned on one of Ryder's friends. Wait, the mindful warrior? That Luca Martinez? My brother had his poster. Ryder silenced his friend with a glare. I don't care if his dad was Muhammad Ali. He's still nothing here. He pushed closer to Luca. You know what happens to new kids who don't know their place? They get initiated. The threat hung in the air. Luca held Ryder's gaze, neither challenging nor submitting. Friday night. Behind the school gym after the basketball game, Ryder said. Unless you're too scared, Stutter Boy. As Ryder walked away, Maya appeared at Luca's side. You're not actually going, are you? It's obviously a setup. Luca closed his locker calmly. My dad said avoidance just postpones the inevitable. He turned to her with unexpected serenity in his eyes. Besides, I've been in scarier situations than facing Ryder Chambers. Like what? Maya asked incredulously. Like holding my father's hand in the hospital as his breathing stopped, Luca said quietly. After that, nothing seems quite as frightening. Word of the initiation spread through Westridge Academy like wildfire. By Friday, it had transformed from a private intimidation into a public spectacle. What Luca didn't know was that Ryder had been planning this moment since the first day, a chance to cement his dominance and make an example of the scholarship kid who didn't belong. Friday night arrived cold and clear, the air sharp with anticipation. The basketball game ended with a Westridge victory, but the real event was just beginning. Students streamed toward the back of the gym, where the school property met the edge of the woods. Luca stood alone in his bedroom, facing the memory wall. His father smiled back at him from a dozen photos, always composed, even in the midst of a fight. "I don't want to hurt anyone, Dad," Luca whispered. "But I won't let them hurt me either." He reached for the small wooden box on his shelf and opened it. Inside lay his father's hand wraps, worn thin from years of use. Luca didn't put them on, but touched them gently before slipping them into his pocket. A talisman, not a weapon. At the clearing behind the gym, nearly 50 students had gathered in a loose circle. Ryder stood in the center, his friends acting as lieutenants, keeping the crowd back. Their plan was simple: humiliation disguised as tradition. New kids faced an initiation challenge, usually rigged games or embarrassing tasks. For Luca, they prepared something special. The crowd parted as Luca approached. He walked steadily, his breath creating small clouds in the cold air. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. His father's rhythm. He actually showed up, someone whispered, surprised. Ryder stepped forward, all swagger and sharp smiles. "Welcome to your initiation, stutter boy. Ready to earn your place at Westridge?" Luca didn't answer, just gazed steadily at Ryder. The silence made Ryder uncomfortable. "So here's how this works," Ryder continued, louder now. "Since you think you're some kind of fighter, we thought we'd give you a chance to prove it." He gestured to a makeshift ring marked with backpacks. 3 minutes with me. If you're still standing, you're in." Whispers rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the usual initiation. This was something darker. Miss Chen's voice cut through Luca's memory. "Sometimes our greatest strength grows from what others see as weakness." Luca stepped forward into the ring, his movements fluid and calm. He stood with his hands at his sides, making no move to raise them in defense. "What's wrong?" "Scared." Ryder taunted, circling him. "And no," Luca said simply. "Just waiting." Frustrated by Luca's composure, Ryder lunged forward, aiming a push at Luca's chest. With minimal movement, Luca shifted his weight, causing Ryder to stumble past him. The crowd murmured in surprise. "Lucky dodge." Ryder snarled, embarrassed. He came at Luca again, this time with a wild swing. Luca didn't strike back. Instead, he moved like water, using only the necessary motion to avoid Ryder's increasingly frustrated attacks. It wasn't fighting, it was the defensive flow his father had drilled into him since childhood. "Fight back," Ryder demanded, his face reddening with each failed attempt. "Why?" Luca asked, his voice suddenly clear and strong. What would that prove? The simplicity of the question stopped Ryder short. In that moment of hesitation, his foot caught on an uneven patch of ground. He stumbled, began to fall, and found Luca's hand gripping his arm, steadying him. Silence fell over the crowd. The script had been flipped. The bully was being helped by his intended victim. "My father taught me that the goal isn't to win fights," Luca said, loud enough for everyone to hear, his stammer gone. "It's to end them. Sometimes that means walking away. Sometimes it means helping your opponent up." He released Ryder's arm once the other boy had regained his balance. Something shifted in Ryder's expression, confusion giving way to unexpected shame. "What's going on here?" Coach Daniel's voice boomed across the clearing as he pushed through the crowd. "Chambers, Martinez, explain yourselves." Before either could speak, Maya stepped forward. "It's not what it looks like, Coach. Luca was just showing us some of his dad's mindfulness techniques." "Right, Ryder." All eyes turned to Ryder. A moment stretched between them, a choice hanging in the balance. "Yeah," Ryder finally said, his voice oddly quiet. "That's what was happening." Coach Daniels looked skeptical, but the united front of the students left him little room to argue. "Well, take it to the gym next time. It's freezing out here. Everyone clear out. Show's over." As the crowd dispersed, Luca stood alone, breathing in the night air. Maya approached, a question in her eyes. "How did you do that?" "Make him back down." Luca pulled his father's hand wraps from his pocket, running his fingers over the worn fabric. "My dad always said the most powerful move in a fight is the one that ends it without anyone getting hurt." Across the clearing, Ryder watched Luca, his worldview fundamentally shaken. For the first time in years, he felt something unexpected, respect tinged with curiosity. The boy he targeted for weakness had shown a different kind of strength entirely, one Ryder didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Monday morning arrived with an unfamiliar tension at Westridge Academy. The story of Friday night had spread, growing and changing with each retelling. Some said Luca had humiliated Ryder. Others claimed he'd shown mercy. Everyone agreed something significant had shifted. Luca arrived early, finding his usual quiet corner of the courtyard for his morning ritual. Eyes closed, breath steady, he moved through the familiar forms his father had taught him. Center, ground, prepare. Can I join you? Luca opened his eyes to find Coach Daniel standing nearby, arms crossed but expression curious rather than confrontational. Of course, Luca nodded, surprised. The coach awkwardly mimicked Luca's stance. I looked up your father this weekend. Marco, the mindful warrior Martinez. Pretty impressive record. He was more proud of his students than his own fights, Luca said, guiding Coach through a basic breathing pattern. He believed fighting was just a laboratory for life's bigger challenges. Is that why you didn't hit Ryder on Friday? Coach asked bluntly. You could have. Luca paused his movements. My dad taught me that winning doesn't always mean the other person loses. Sometimes true victory is finding a better way forward for everyone. Coach nodded slowly. You know, I could use someone with that philosophy to help with some of our younger athletes. They get too caught up in winning at all costs. I'd be happy to help, Luca said, small smile forming. In chemistry class, Ryder was already at their shared table when Luca arrived. The usual taunting was conspicuously absent. About Friday, Ryder began awkwardly. It's fine, Luca said simply. Let's just focus on the experiment. They worked in uncomfortable silence until Ryder suddenly asked, How do you do it? Stay so calm when people are coming at you. Luca considered the question. My dad called it finding the eye of the hurricane. The storm is still happening, but you're in the quiet center. Could anyone learn that? Ryder asked, his voice carefully casual. My father taught everyone from pro fighters to stressed out executives, Luca replied. He believed anyone could learn it with practice. The conversation ended there, but something had begun to shift. At lunch, Luca sat with Maya and her friends as usual. To everyone's shock, Miss Chen approached their table. Luca, I heard about Friday night, she said quietly. Perhaps those essay excerpts will be even more valuable for our class to hear now. I think I could do that. Luca nodded, surprising himself with his confidence. Later that afternoon, Luca stood before Ms. Chen's class, his father's journal in his hands. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, he spoke without a stammer. My father wrote this the day before his last fight. True strength isn't measured by how hard you can hit, but by how centered you remain when the world is hitting you. Stand in your power not by dominating others, but by refusing to be dominated by fear, anger, or doubt. The class sat in unusual silence. In the back row, Ryder stared at his desk, his expression unreadable. After class, Ryder waited in the hallway until everyone else had left. When Luca emerged, he fell into step beside him. Can we talk? Somewhere private. They ended up in the empty music room. Ryder paced while Luca stood still, waiting. I've been a complete jerk to you, Ryder finally said. And you had every chance to humiliate me Friday night. You could have taken me down in front of everyone. That wouldn't have helped either of us, Luca said simply. Why do you care about helping me? Ryder demanded. I've been nothing but cruel to you since day one. Luca considered his answer carefully. My dad would say that hurt people hurt people. He taught me to look beyond behavior to what causes it. Something broke in Ryder's carefully maintained facade. My father left us last year. Just packed up and disappeared with his assistant. No warning. No goodbye. One day he was there, the next day, empty closets. Understanding dawned on Luca's face. My dad died last year. Brain aneurysm after a fight. So we're both missing fathers, Ryder said with a bitter laugh. Except yours was worth missing. Loss is loss, Luca said quietly. My dad would say pain isn't a competition. Ryder wiped quickly at his eyes. I don't know how to be different. I've been this person for so long. My father always said change happens one breath at a time, Luca replied. Maybe we start there. As they left the music room, something had fundamentally changed. Not friendship exactly, but the beginning of understanding. The halls of Westridge Academy seemed different somehow, as if the invisible barriers between students had begun to dissolve. Word spread quickly that Luca would be helping Coach Daniels with a new morning program. More surprisingly, rumors circulated that the Ryder Chambers, had asked to be included. The power dynamics that had seemed so entrenched just weeks before were shifting like sand beneath a wave, revealing something more solid underneath. The crisp autumn morning filled the Westridge Academy courtyard with golden light. Where once there had been only hurried students rushing to beat the bell, now a circle of 20 teenagers sat cross-legged on yoga mats, eyes closed, following the steady instructions of the boy in the center. For counts in through your nose, Luca guided, his voice clear and confident. Hold for 7. Release for 8 through your mouth. Feel your body getting heavier with each breath. 8 weeks had passed since his arrival at Westridge. 8 weeks that had transformed not just Luca, but the school itself. Coach Daniels stood at the edge of the courtyard, arms crossed but expression approving as he watched the morning mindfulness session. Beside him, Ms. Chin smiled. I never thought I'd see Ryder Chambers doing breathing exercises, Coach muttered. Miss Chen nodded toward where Ryder sat, eyes closed, face peaceful. Sometimes students just need the right teacher. After the breathing exercises, Luca led the group through basic movement patterns, the foundations of his father's training system. Balance, control, awareness. His father's old lunchbox sat open nearby, now holding not food but his training journal, hand wraps, and a small framed photo of Luca Martinez. Partner up, Luca instructed. Remember, the goal isn't to overpower your partner, but to become aware of their energy and respond appropriately. Maya paired with a freshman girl who had recently transferred to Westridge. Across the circle, Ryder worked with a quiet boy who had once been the target of his ridicule. Their movements were hesitant but respectful. Principal Warner observed from his office window, shaking his head in wonder. If someone had told me 2 months ago that Luca Martinez would become one of our most influential students, I wouldn't have believed it. Influence doesn't always come from the loudest voice, Ms. Chin replied. Sometimes it comes from the steadiest presence. After the session, students gather their things, conversations flowing easily between social groups that had once been strictly separated. Luca packed his father's belongings carefully back into the lunchbox. My dad would have loved this, he told Maya, gesturing to the dispersing group. He always said his techniques weren't really about fighting. They were about creating harmony where there was conflict. You've changed this place, Maya said. People actually talk to each other now. Really talk. Ryder approached them, no longer flanked by his usual entourage. The arrogant mask he'd worn for years had softened into something more authentic. Thanks for today, Luca, he said, then hesitated. Listen, we're putting together a memorial fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. I remember you mentioned your dad did charity events there. Would you want to help organize it? The invitation represented more than just a school activity. It was an acknowledgement, an offering, a bridge. I like that, Luca nodded. Later that day, Luca stood before the student council, no trace of his former stammer as he outlined ideas for the fundraiser. His worn shoes and second-hand uniform no longer seemed to matter to anyone, least of all to Luca himself. After school, he walked home with a lightness in his steps. The apartment seemed brighter somehow when he entered, his mother already home for once, preparing dinner. I got the day shift, she explained, hugging him. And I have news. That MMA gym where your father used to train? They called. They want to start a youth program based on his methods. They asked if you would help develop it. Luca stood before the memory wall, his father's face looking back at him from a dozen moments frozen in time. He always said his work would continue through his students. I didn't realize you'd become one of them, his mother said softly. I think I always was, Luca replied. I just needed the right moment to remember it. The next morning, as students gathered in the courtyard, something remarkable happened. Principal Warner himself joined the circle, awkwardly lowering himself onto a borrowed mat. I've been watching this group for weeks, he explained. Maybe it's time I learned what all the fuss is about. Luca looked around the circle, at Maya's encouraging smile, at Ryder's nod of respect, at Coach Daniel's thumbs up from the sidelines, at the diverse group of students who had once been divided by invisible barriers. My father believed that true strength comes from within. Luca began, his voice carrying across the courtyard. But he also believed that strength grows when it's shared. As the group closed their eyes and took their first collective breath, Luca felt his father's presence more strongly than he had since the day he died. Not as a memory, but as a continuation, a ripple effect touching lives beyond his own. The bullied newcomer had become not just accepted, but essential, not by changing to fit Westridge Academy, but by helping Westridge Academy change to reveal its better self. In his father's words, which Luca now claimed as his own, the strongest fighter isn't the one who hits hardest. It's the one who remains standing when the fight is over and then reaches back to help others stand too. Luca never threw a punch, but somehow he changed everything. In a world where power often looks loud and cruel, he showed that real strength can be quiet, steady, and kind. The moment he caught Ryder instead of letting him fall, that wasn't weakness. That was courage. That was love in action. And maybe that's the point. Not to win every fight, but to walk through it without losing who you are. Luca didn't just survive the storm, he became the calm in the middle of it. And by doing that, he gave others the strength to stop fighting and start healing too. That wraps it up. Would you have done what Luca did or gone another way? Let's chat about it below. Thanks so much for watching, and if this story made you feel something, send it to a friend. Don't forget to subscribe and keep the momentum going with another story after this.